The Titanic, a name etched into the very core of maritime history. Delivered in 1912, this majestic vessel embarked on its maiden voyage, only to meet a chilling fate in the Atlantic, struck down by an iceberg. Now it rests silently in the ocean's depths, slowly dissolving into memory as saltwater and time complete what the iceberg began. Eventually, nothing will remain of its once grand form. Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Titanic. Let's begin. When multiple ships are built following the same blueprint, they're called sister ships. Titanic had two. The Olympic, which was completed first and briefly held the title of the largest ship in the world, until the Titanic surpassed it by just a few meters. The third, originally named Gigantic, was later renamed Britannic. Oddly enough, most of the visuals we see of the Titanic, photos, footage, are actually of the Olympic. Only a single piece of real footage of the Titanic exists, capturing its departure from Southampton. Built over 3 years in a Belfast dry dock, the Titanic stretched an impressive 269 meters. April 11, 1912. She launches from Southampton, England, gleaming with new technology. Safety was a key feature. 15 watertight compartments that could be sealed off electronically. The design was so advanced it was believed the ship could stay afloat even if 4 compartments were flooded. The law required 16 lifeboats. Titanic had 20, exceeding the mandate, but still only enough for half the people aboard. In 1912, with European migrants flooding toward America, shipping companies raced to dominate the transatlantic route. Speed was king, and the Titanic was no slouch, capable of 23 knots. On board was Captain Edward J. Smith, a 5-star captain renowned within the White Star Line, commanding what was expected to be a smooth 7-day journey to New York. The skies were calm, and forecasts predicted minimal turbulence. But warm waters meant danger. Icebergs from the northern continental shelf, propelled by the Labrador Current, drifted southward into Titanic's path. On April 14th, the radio operator aboard Titanic began receiving urgent ice warnings. This was a time without radar, email, or satellite alerts. Everything came through radio transmissions, manned by dedicated operators on every vessel. Icebergs were being spotted in the northern Atlantic, and Titanic's bridge was well aware. But first, a quick detour into iceberg science. These icy giants calve off from polar shelves when temperatures rise. And what you see above water is just a sliver, less than 1/8 of the entire mass. That's where the danger lies. What's below the surface can tear through steel like paper. Upon receiving the ice warnings, Captain Smith shifted the ship's course 10 to 15 miles south, enough, he hoped, to evade disaster. Keep in mind, transatlantic routes weren't fixed. They flexed with the weather. That night, April 14th, around 8:55 p.m., the captain made a final visit to the bridge, checked the ship's progress, and turned in for the night. Skies were cloudless, no moon, just stars. The sea was eerily calm. Calm weather seems ideal, but sometimes it's more dangerous. Here's why. When seas are rough, crashing waves reveal lurking icebergs. As they break against hidden masses, the white spray signals danger. But when waters are glass-like, there's no such warning. Even worse, dark icebergs. When an iceberg flips from erosion beneath the surface, its smooth, translucent underside faces up. These dark icebergs become almost invisible at night. Fresh ones glow faintly, but these flipped, wave-smooth giants, practically ghosts in the water, and on calm seas, they're next to impossible to spot. That's the paradox. Rough seas scream warnings. Calm ones lull you into silence. High above the deck, in the crow's nest, stood the Titanic's lookouts. 2 men scanning the vast darkness for danger. One of them, Fred Fleet, squinted at the horizon and caught sight of something unsettling. A shadow darker than the night sky, blotting out stars. As the ship glided closer, he recognized it. A dark iceberg. No waves, no crash, just silence. He rang the alarm and shouted those infamous words, "Iceberg, dead ahead!" The command was relayed instantly. The officer on duty shouted, "Hard to port," hoping to veer the massive ship away. But at 23 knots, the Titanic was hurtling through the ocean, a floating behemoth with too much momentum. The alarm pierced the night, echoing across the deck. "Iceberg right ahead." In that frozen moment, it was already too late. When the order was given to turn hard to port, the Titanic began veering left. But it was too late. The iceberg loomed just 400 to 450 meters ahead. For a ship of Titanic size, that was no distance at all. If you ask me, at that speed and that distance, there was no avoiding a hit. The ship scraped along the iceberg's starboard side, and in 1912, welding wasn't what it is today. Back then, rivets held ships together, and those rivets began to pop under pressure. 5 watertight compartments were breached. Captain Edward J. Smith, awakened at 11:48 p.m., made his way to the bridge, surveyed the damage, and headed below to see it for himself. When he saw the flooding, 5 compartments taking in water, he knew instantly the Titanic was going down. He returned to the bridge close to midnight and, unless the engineers could somehow pump out the incoming water, he knew there were 2 hours left, at best. At 12:14 a.m., he instructed his radio operator, Jack Phillips, to send out a distress call. "We need help." He was fully aware. 20 lifeboats were never going to be enough for everyone aboard. Now here's the thing, especially back then, passengers never understood the seriousness of such a situation, no matter how hard the crew tried. Unlike an airplane, ships don't nosedive. They sink slowly, almost deceptively. Because of the time it takes, people hesitate. Even when disaster strikes, it doesn't feel like disaster at first. After the iceberg hit, passengers on deck were playing with bits of ice. They didn't feel the impact. It was a brush, not a crash. So when told to gather at the lifeboat stations, many ignored it. It wasn't until the abandoned ship order was given that the gravity started to set in. But even then, most didn't take it seriously. At 12:25 a.m., the SS Carpathia answered the Titanic's SOS call. SSOE stands for steamship, by the way. Just like we use Mr. or Dr. for people, ships also have titles. Today you'd see MV for motor vessel or MT for motor tanker. Carpathia agreed to come, but she was 94 kilometers away, 3 to 4 hours out. Titanic didn't have that long. At 12:40 a.m., the first lifeboat was lowered. It had 62 seats. Only 25 were filled. That's how lightly people took it. Despite the officers urging women and children to board, many refused to leave their husbands. After the first few boats left half empty, panic finally set in. Then everyone wanted a seat. But by then, the boats were nearly gone. It's tragic. Captain Smith had to make a hard choice. If he'd waited until people were convinced, all 20 boats would never have launched in time. By 1:30 a.m., the bow began to dip. The ship was trimming forward. Panic surged. At 1:45 a.m., the final lifeboat was lowered. 1,500 people were still aboard. Some jumped into the sea thinking they had a chance. But the North Atlantic was brutal. Hypothermia can kill in minutes. The temperature was merciless. At 1:45 a.m., the lights went out. The generators failed. And in the vast darkness, with 705 people drifting in lifeboats, the screams echoed across the water. For a few more minutes, that's all anyone could hear. Most of the people who jumped into the freezing water didn't survive. The 705th who managed to board the lifeboats waited through the cold, dark night, scanning the horizon for help. Finally, at 4:30 a.m., the SS Carpathia arrived to rescue the survivors. If only the Titanic had stayed afloat for just 2 more hours, more lives, perhaps most, could have been saved. If you ask me, why did the Titanic sink? I'd say it was fate. No one made a critical mistake. The duty officers on the bridge acted with good judgment. The lookouts in the crow's nest spotted the iceberg and did their job. The iceberg itself, by estimates, must have weighed over 270,000 tons. These icebergs aren't your everyday chunks of floating ice. They break off from the continental shelf and begin as soft snow. But over centuries, they compress into something rock hard, denser and stronger than you can imagine. Not snow, not regular ice. Something far more solid, capable of tearing through steel. That's exactly what happened to Titanic. For decades, people search for the wreck. But once a ship sinks, it doesn't just stay in one place. Currents move it around, which makes locating it incredibly difficult. But in 1985, they finally found it. The ship had broken in two. The bow was found 2.5 miles away from the stern, and between them lay scattered debris, plates, spoons, shoes. No bodies, though. The ocean claims everything. Clothes, leather shoes. They may remain, but bones. They decompose over time. That's just the truth of the sea. Titanic wasn't the only ship to sink in those waters. Many have been lost in the North Atlantic, but what made Titanic's story stand out was the sheer loss of life. 1,500 souls. That's why it holds such a powerful place in our history. I've passed through that very area myself. Back then, I wasn't making videos. You can't see anything from the surface. The Titanic rests 3,840 meters deep, which is about 340 nautical miles down. When I first learned about it, during my early days in the Merchant Navy, the site had only limited access. You could observe, but never touch. The moment we passed by that stretch of sea, it hit differently. A part of history lies beneath those waves. So that's today's story, and really there's no one to blame. In maritime law, we call it an act of God, when a situation unfolds that's beyond human control. It's even recognized by international courts. After Titanic, major changes were made. Lifeboat requirements were revised. The U.S. launched the North Atlantic Ice Patrol, where aircraft monitor for icebergs and report them to prevent such disasters. If you found this story compelling, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It's a tragic tale, yes, but one that needs to be remembered. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.